love, money, the life you want to live, these things are on the other side of your shadows. The pain, the trauma, and the patterns you have within you, those things you try to push down, escape, and run away from, these things will keep you from living the life that you want to live. It doesn't matter what goals you have. If you want to manifest, if you want love, if you want money, to lose weight, have better health, a better car, a better house, if you want to feel more confident and happy, shadow work will help you in any and all of these areas in your life. For example, you don't raise your vibration so much as you start to heal and cut out the things that are lowering it. And doing shadow work is very similar. By integrating and examining these pieces and parts of yourself and doing the inner work, you naturally change, and then your life and external reality changes. Why? Because this external reality is nothing more than a reflection and a mirror of your internal reality. So if you heal those shadows within and do the inner work, then you heal and improve everything inside and out. Now, I talk about shadow work. What is the shadow? The shadow is created from the wounds and traumas in your life. It is the unhealthy patterns you adopted to stay safe and get your needs met in dysfunctional environments. Now, normally your core shadow is built during childhood, and trauma and wounding as an adult adds on to it, of course. But being a people pleaser, being a nice guy or a nice girl, shutting down your emotions, having a fear of intimacy, having a fear of abandonment, sometimes even being an empath itself is a core shadow response, because you learn to tune in to other people's emotional states as a measure of your own safety. If mom and dad are mad, I'll suffer for it. And any of these patterns were your subconscious mind's response to surviving these traumatic environments and experiences. Now, as an adult with more control over your life, these patterns no longer help you, they no longer serve you, and instead they hold you back. That fear of being abandoned, for example, manifests as people abandoning you, or being afraid of that emotional intimacy. That scarcity mindset around money will always keep it at arm's length. And being a people pleaser or an empath that doesn't set healthy boundaries will then attract narcissists and people who will take advantage of you. Being shut down emotionally, for example, prevents you allowing you to create meaningful friendships and love relationships. And these are just a few examples. Your shadow is unique to you and contains the unique patterns that helped you survive, which now, unfortunately, are blocking your growth. And the shadow can manifest in an infinite variety of ways. When we talk about shadow work, what is that exactly? Well, shadow work is when you identify your shadows and you start integrating all of that energy, those disparate pieces of yourself, back into your main being. You are healing those fragmented aspects of yourself. You acknowledge and integrate those survival patterns you created that now no longer serve you. A lot of shadow work is essentially trauma healing. It's taking the time now to process and feel through the traumas you experienced. At the time when it happened, those events, it wasn't safe for you to feel it. So you shut it down and your memory shuts down. But those emotions and that energy gets stored in your central nervous system and in the body. The body always remembers trauma, even if the mind doesn't necessarily. And that's where you get into trouble, because now all this energy's stuck and it hasn't been processed or integrated. Now, going through this 4-step process that I'm about to share with you will help you begin the journey of healing your shadow and living a more fulfilled and happy life. Until you face the darkness and those trapped emotions and energies within yourself, you will always be stuck playing out those same patterns over and over again, with love, with money, with health, with the overall state and being of your life. And be kind to yourself during this process. There can be a tendency when you start this work to get angry and upset with yourself as you do this. I can't believe I acted this way. I can't believe I was so stupid to date this person. They're obviously like a terrible narcissistic person. I can't believe I gambled all of our money away. And it's not very helpful to the healing process. Now, maybe at first you've got to get a bit of that out. You have to get out that energy of, okay, I was dumb, I did some dumb stuff. But eventually we want to shift to looking at ourselves as a child. You know, looking at ourselves as that inner child and thinking to ourselves, we wouldn't speak that way to a child, right? If we have children or we know children, we wouldn't go to a kid and say, oh, you're so stupid. I can't believe you dated this kid in first grade. Obviously, he's picking his nose and he's an idiot. Like, but then as an adult, we're often so critical of ourselves in those situations. So instead, we want to reframe that whole thing to go, okay, this was my inner child, for example, or this was a previous version of me. And I had a lot of stuff going on and I was doing the best I could and I made mistakes. But I don't need to beat myself up about it necessarily. We want to approach this kind of with love and compassion and that unconditional loving space. Now, these patterns and shadows you created had a positive intention. It was your subconscious mind's way of trying to keep you safe and get your needs met in these impossible dysfunctional scenarios. So honor them and thank them as you move through this process. Thank these patterns as they come up and as you become aware of them. Now, let's get started. Step number 1 is awareness. You become aware of the pattern, the feelings and the thoughts. And this awareness, our goal with this awareness is an unconditional loving space, not a judging space, not a wanting to be different space, not a wanting to heal it space. Literally just making space of unconditional love and awareness for the pattern to exist. And sometimes it can be tricky when you first start shadow work to actually find a shadow to work with, because we were so used to pushing it down, we're so used to not acknowledging it, that it's hard to kind of discover it. So it can be helpful to look at your life as a greater picture and look at anywhere in your life where there's dysfunctional patterns repeating. This can be money, this can be love, can be health, maybe like family or friend dynamics, anything in your life that there's a pattern of dysfunction around. There's probably some shadow work to do there, and that would be kind of one of the first things I would choose to work with. Now, when it comes to the space we work with this in, I find a loose meditation is the perfect place for this. You could put some music on in the background. You could sit in silence, eyes open, eyes closed, doesn't really matter. The whole goal is for us to simply sit and observe the patterns and emotions that begin to bubble up. You can even bring to mind an emotionally charged memory or a specific piece of the shadow that you want to work with, and then just sit with it. This is the hardest part, but this is the easiest way, is literally just to sit with it, because this pattern is going to try to trick you into getting up and stopping, because the pattern knows, this emotional energetic pattern within you, it knows what's going to happen. It's going to die in a way, metaphorically. It's going to die, and I guess quite literally too. It's going to die and reintegrate with you. And the pattern doesn't want this. As much as the pattern wants to be observed and to be reintegrated, kind of the dysfunctional part of the pattern is that it doesn't, because it means it won't survive, right? Its individuated energy won't survive when it reintegrates with you. Kind of like when we die and we reintegrate with the universe. In a way, our individuation dies because we go back to being part of the one. So in any case, your pattern is going to give you all sorts of excuses and reasons why you should stop the practice. This is boring. Did I leave the oven on? I'm hungry. My back hurts. What was that noise? Did I lock the car before I came up here? The pattern doesn't want you to look at it. So the pattern is going to keep throwing these obstacles and excuses, but what we need to do here is just continue to sit and observe as we move into step number 2, and we keep that unconditional loving awareness. Now, step 2 is dialogue, right? Let's work with this pattern. As we're sitting in that unconditional loving space and we're observing the pattern, we can have sort of like a pretend dialogue with the pattern, that fragment of ourselves. Maybe that pattern shows up as our inner child, if this was a childhood wounding. Maybe it shows up as a previous adult version of self where we had some trauma. You can begin to ask questions and then sit in that quiet awareness until you receive an answer. And a lot of times the pattern will bubble up an answer. For example, what is your purpose? What is your intention? Why are you here? What do you want from me? What unfinished business do we have? What do you want to express? Now, step 3 pairs with step 2. We want to listen fully and honor whatever our pattern says. Oftentimes, when you give that of awareness to a pattern for long enough, that pattern will then subside and reintegrate as part of your whole. But depending on how severe the trauma was that made the pattern, it may take a more diving deep into it to resolve. And there's no rush here. There's no right or wrong way to do this. We want to drop all expectation and all attachment to outcome, because these places and times were places where your needs were not met, usually by your parents and caregivers, but it could be with adults later in life. And what this pattern really needs from you most of all is love, acceptance, the light of your unconditional loving awareness, the freedom to finally express what it was unable to express back then. And this is encapsulated by a powerful statement you can say, which is, you're allowed to feel blank in my body. So for example, you're allowed to feel abandoned in my body. You're allowed to be afraid in my body. You're allowed to be angry in my body. You're allowed to have scarcity in my body. And don't worry, these aren't like affirmations that we're going to integrate as part of our daily routine. We're saying this to really give the pattern freedom to be seen, to be heard, to be expressed, because only in that space can that pattern reintegrate, and can you begin to heal and move towards the life you want to live without being held down by this. Because back when you were a kid, for example, it wasn't safe to feel these ways. It wasn't safe to feel angry at your parents if they were abusive to you, right? It wasn't safe to feel these different things. You had to quite literally turn it off and shut it down. So we want to give the pattern a chance to be seen, to be heard now. And then that takes us right into step 4, which is integration. When we feel like the pattern has been fully heard, fully loved, it's been read bedtime stories, it's really good to go. We can begin to move into the integration phase. And this is where that fragmented piece of yourself can begin to merge back into the one self. And this probably won't happen the first time you observe a pattern. And even when it does happen, you may only end up integrating a small piece of a greater pattern, of dysfunction. And that's okay. Again, no right way, no wrong way. This is a lifelong process of dealing with our shadow, of doing the integrative work, of really becoming whole, healthy, and complete. And if you really want to go deep, it can be helpful to take yourself back to a time and place in your memory when that pattern was first formed. Maybe this is literally these traumatic events as they have happened. And big disclaimer here, digging into your trauma and really going specifically and reliving memories can be very difficult. And if you've had a lot of heavy trauma, you may need a mental health professional to kind of guide you down this process. Disclaimer, I've dealt in process with sexual trauma, physical abuse as a kid, and I did it myself, but it can be very heavy and overwhelming at times, and it can be very destabilizing. So you may need a therapist or someone there, a sort of third-party entity that can kind of act as a guide and almost a shaman in a way of framing and creating a frame for you to safely process it. But I will continue to describe a way that you can do that. You can take yourself back to that time and place in your mind's eye, and you can choose to perceive that memory differently. Literally rewrite the memory so that in this time you're in your power. A lot of the sting of traumatic events is our loss of power. It's not necessarily the event itself, as terrible as it may have been. And memories are not set in stone. Neurology has proven this, that every time we recall a memory, we literally change it. Memories are mutable. It's just a pattern in our neural network. We can change them. And we can change the events of the memory in addition to the emotions, feelings, and the meaning that we attach to it. And 2 concrete techniques you can work with are EMDR and EFT. And these are amazing tools to help you with the practice of rewriting memories. With EMDR, for example, a flashlight will be shined across your vision from side to side, and you'll follow that light with your eyes. This bilateral movement literally changes the way your brain processes the memory as you choose to remember the traumatic event. And I'm going to leave a link in the description to a YouTube video that literally emulates having the light. And you just do this with your eyes while you remember the event, and you rewrite the event where you're in your own power. And I've done this myself, and it's worked great for a lot of the traumatic memories where I still held a lot of anger onto it. Now, EFT tapping is another modality you can use under energy psychology. And with this, you're tapping on specific acupuncture meridian points. And these can also help to kind of calm down the emotions that you have. And I'm going to be making a lot of videos about EFT because it's so powerful and scientifically proven to make a lot of changes in your mind and your body through your emotions along with manifesting. So keep an eye on the channel for that. But in addition to changing the memory, you can also imagine being there for yourself as the version you are now. So for example, you can imagine that now adult you was there to comfort child version of you. You can also imagine, I've done this too, where I've inserted myself into the memory that as my adult version, I was there to protect my younger self and literally change the entire memory, change the timeline because I believe it now. And you can also give yourself the support and validation that you never got as a kid. Maybe you had a lot of these traumatic events and your parents were either unavailable or the ones causing the trauma. So they certainly weren't going to be the ones that were going to be there for you and comfort you afterwards. Well, you can go back in time in your mind and comfort yourself And that pattern will feel that and will get the love it didn't get at those times. Now, as you finish this practice, you can then begin and thanking the pattern. Thank that pattern for keeping you safe all of these years. It was created out of a positive intention of keeping you safe. You can give that pattern that unconditional love and attention it didn't receive back then, and you can tell it that it's okay now. We are safe. We don't need to act in this way anymore. That it's safe for that version of you to come home and to let go and to reintegrate with ourselves. Now, I want to make sure that you don't let this become just another edutainment video where you intellectually understand what I'm saying in the video, you enjoyed the video, but then you just go on to watch more videos without actually sitting down and doing the process that I just shared with you. You can't simply intellectually know this and hope to get any results. You've got to take action. Action is the currency of 3D reality. So what I invite you to do here is to go back and through this video, write down the steps from the video, take down some notes on how to approach this through each step, and get started today. Some of this stuff can be really heavy at first, depending on your level of trauma. So I recommend doing it when you have time to decompress afterwards. Like, you don't want to do this in the 15 minutes before you're going to go to work or go to school. You know, you may not want to do it when you have to go to work the next day. Like, maybe you want to do it on the weekend or when you're going to have a day off, because this stuff can be heavy and then you need some time to rest and reintegrate. And eventually it won't be so dramatic and traumatic, but if you've never done this at all, it can be a huge release at first. And you're going to cry, and you're going to cry as much as you need to. The tears must flow to release and reintegrate sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with you. That's how the body processes and releases those trapped emotions. And if you really get into some heavy traumatic memories, you can flip through half a dozen emotions in one session. Crying in 1 minute, laughing the next, then you're angry, and then you're afraid and shameful. It's all normal for shadow work. I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years. It's all normal, and it's all crazy, and it can be fun in a way when you get used to it, because you're releasing energy. And you know, on the other side of that crying session, the other side of that anger session is freedom. And freedom from the past, freedom from being trapped. And another way that we get stuck and trapped is through something called ancestral trauma. Think of ancestral trauma as a larger shadow that follows a whole family line relative to your personal shadow. And there's different protocols and processes for healing ancestral shadows. And in this video, I have an ancestral trauma clearing ritual that's been very powerful for me and for people that have watched the video. I highly recommend watching this video. It's really gonna help if you start working on your own shadow, but things aren't shifting for you. Maybe you got some ancestral trauma that needs to be healed. I hope you choose to make it a great day, and much peace to you, my friend.